Good evening, I'm Shelley Kaminer. Today, May 28th, is Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day. It was on this day in 1967 that the city was unified after being divided, Berlin-like, by the Jordanians for 19 years. Jerusalem's holiest sites were liberated and Jewish rights restored. On this Yom Yerushalayim, Israel's capital is the focal point of controversy around the world. Earlier this month, Arab and left-wing Jews protested the government's appropriation of 134 acres of vacant land for the development of thousands of apartments and a police station. Raucous debate erupted in the Knesset as the government surrendered on the land acquisition, and Prime Minister Rabin caved in to Arab and world pressure by declaring that no land would be acquired by the government for Jewish development in the eastern part of the city. An attempted resolution condemning Israel by the United Nations Security Council was blocked by US veto, the first in 5 years. Jordan's King Hussein and the Egyptians are leading the charge for an Arab League summit on the Jerusalem issue. Yasser Arafat threatened to blow up the peace process over Jerusalem. Former Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir had this to say on the subject.
And the focus now seems to be again Jerusalem. I feel obliged to call on all who proclaim that united Jerusalem will never be divided again to create the appropriate reality. In the meantime, Faisal Husseini of the well-known Arab family, very hostile to Israel since generations, continues to carry out his dangerous activities, acting as Arafat's representative for the Palestinian Authority in Jerusalem. Faisal Husseini has set up offices in Orient House, and from there he is laying the groundstone for an Arabic-Palestinian Jerusalem. He conducts diplomatic activities from Orient House, accepting formal emissaries and dignitaries from foreign countries, has already hosted a delegation from the European Community, British representatives, Scandinavian emissaries, and even the new ambassador from Jordan. In addition, the PLO has established a presence in Jerusalem by opening other offices for other branches of the Palestinian Authority, and there are agents of the security services of Gaza walking about freely in Jerusalem. Recently, Arafat has loudly condemned the appropriation of land in Jerusalem by the Israeli government for the purpose of increased Jewish building in Jerusalem. He has turned to the United Nations, to the US, to Russia, and to the European countries on this issue. Our current government has not prevented him from all these activities, even though it paves the way to the future Palestinization of Jerusalem. During the days of the good government, this step would have been impossible.
Jerusalem's Mayor Ehud Olmert was equally emphatic.
They want Jerusalem because if they want Jerusalem, if they get Jerusalem, in their perception, they break up the foundations of Jewish existence.
The other Jerusalem flashpoint is the potential relocation of the US Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. In early May, Senate Majority Leader and presidential candidate Bob Dole declared in Washington at the AIPAC conference that I was proud to join with 92 of my Senate colleagues in signing a letter last March urging our administration to move our embassy. I think the time has come to move beyond letters, so I will introduce the Jerusalem Embassy Relocation Implementation Act. It mandates that the US open a new embassy in Jerusalem no later than May 31, 1999. Dole also spoke forcefully about Jerusalem being special for the Jewish people and that the city remain undivided under Israeli rule. Surprisingly, the Israeli government has been trying to derail this embassy move in fear it will torpedo the talks with the PLO. The proposed embassy site is a 10-acre plot in the western half of the city, not near any Arab neighborhoods. Likud chairman Benjamin Netanyahu urged all Zionist members of Knesset to express support for the U.S. Embassy's immediate relocation to Jerusalem. Israel is the only country with which the U.S. has relations and does not have its embassy in the country's designated capital. We'll be right back in a moment. Please stay with us. American Jews have been vigorously demonstrating against the Israeli government policies. One such large protest took place a few weeks ago. Caroline Greenberg has this report.
On this cold and rainy spring day, a couple of hundred Jews are standing behind me who've come out today to protest Prime Minister Rabin's appearance at a dinner tonight at New York's Waldorf Astoria. The foul weather didn't dampen the dedication or the spirits of the large crowd. Many here were also in front of the Waldorf during heavy snows in February, when Shimon Peres declared his ultimate life's ambition to be Secretary General of the UN. We caught up with some of those attending the demonstration.
I feel it's obscene the way Rabin and Peres are destroying the Israeli nation.
What's going on in Israel is horrendous with the government. It's absolutely ridiculous government. They're giving away all the land which belongs to us, which belongs to the Jews. And you just have crazy people in power.
I've never felt so estranged about the direction Israel has been going in my adult life. I can't remember ever feeling this depressed about the state of the country, the spirit of the people, the morale of the people. This is a really pivotal point, I feel, and I think that the world just has to know, and Peres has to know, that we're just going to keep coming out here, and we're just going to keep making our point, and we're just not going to be convinced by his platitudes, and in the face of constant danger, in the face of constant bloodshed, we're just not going to take his lies and lying down.
Meanwhile, behind me in New York's Waldorf Astoria, the Prime Minister and others sit warm and dry inside. Caroline Greenberg for JNN World News.
Former Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir toured New York this month on behalf of the Israel Community Development Fund, a group which raises funds for humanitarian purposes on behalf of the 140,000 Jews living in the territories. Addressing a packed house in Riverdale, New York, Shamir railed against the Land for Peace formula, asserted a Likud government would not secure the interests of the Arabs, and went on to talk about the Golan Heights.
Our presence on the heights serves a double purpose. We deter the Syrians from attacking us, and we are close enough to Damascus to threaten them. This presence has prevented war for more than 20 years and will continue to do so if we retain our strategic advantage. Recently, we heard of a new ridiculous and dangerous idea to replace the Israeli Defense Force on the Golan Heights with American soldiers. Those who are aware of the essence of our relationship with the American people should realize the emotional and rational strength of our policy never to ask for American soldiers to defend our security.
Shamir also spoke on terrorism in Jerusalem.
In view of the unity of opinion and consensus across the entire spectrum of the Jewish nation, the Jerusalem must remain eternally united, indivisible, and under Israeli sovereignty. In view of that powerful consensus, I see an urgent need for the government of Israel to declare forthwith to the Arabs and to all the world that Jerusalem, Israel's eternal capital, should never be subject for occupation anywhere. Dear friends, in the last weeks we have been witness to a wave of bloody terrorist attacks perpetrated by fanatic Islamic organizations. Arafat, chairman of the PLO, who committed himself in the Oslo agreements of last year to banish all terror from the country has failed to fulfill its obligation. We can assume that there are two reasons for this. He has no interest in doing so because he still believes in terror, or he is unable to fulfill this obligation due to the enthusiastic support for terrorism of the Palestinian public. The true reason is not really important at this point. More important is the fact that Arafat does not put an end to terror, and therefore the government of Israel, the IDF, and our security forces are forced to carry out this function on our own. We have no choice other than to take back this responsibility onto our shoulders for the security of the nation.
Also in New York this month was former Defense Minister General Ariel Sharon, speaking at the heavily attended Yesha dinner in Manhattan, an impressive show of philanthropic support for the Jews of Judea and Samaria. General Sharon had this to say to the very sympathetic crowd.
A country that within its borders, in its capital, in Jerusalem, a Palestinian government is working there. And that is a clear violation of the agreement. I mean, I was against all this agreement. I never believed in agreement with a war criminal. And Arafat according to every criteria, is a war criminal. There is no one in our world since the Nazi's time that got so much civilian Jewish blood on his hands like Arafat. So I never believed in this agreement. What's Arafat? Arafat is a terrorist, a head of one terrorist organization out of 15 that exist.
We'll be right back in just a moment. Please stay with us.
לא די לשאת מילים על רמת הגולן. יש לממש אותה בבנייה, בתעסוקה. לא יעלה על הדעת שגם בשלום נרד מרמת הגולן. מי שיעלה על הדעת לרדת מרמת הגולן יפקיר את ביטחון ישראל. אנא, כולנו יחד, בואו נשקיע כאן, כך בלבד נממש את מחויבותנו לרמת הגולן. ולכם המתיישבים, אתם העושים את רמת הגולן למה שהיא. כל הכבוד לכם.
The Salute to Israel parade is the highlight of New York's support for Israel. The Likud's Beitar and Tegar youth groups were marching. Caroline Greenberg has this report.
We're standing here on East 54th Street with the Tagar and Beitar youth groups right behind me as they're getting ready to round the corner to 5th Avenue to march for support of the settlements and the freedom of Jonathan Pollard. The members of the Likud's Beitar and Tagar youth movements ran the risk of intense criticism and of being politically incorrect as they marched down 5th Avenue calling attention to the plight of Jonathan Pollard, imprisoned for life for passing military intelligence to Israel and on behalf of the 140,000 Jews living in the territories. These kids were out marching on behalf of people most have never met.
Jonathan Pollard has been in jail for 10 years, and people who have done worse crimes than him and equal crimes than him have been let out after 5 and 3 and 4 years. And this is not equal justice. The United States is a place of democracy. It's a place of justice. And we need equal justice. And we need to show that we are a country with equal justice. And we think this is an abomination of laws, of rules, of anything, because Jonathan Pollard has been in jail for way too long. He did the crime, he served his time, he should be let free.
We're also here to support the territories which belong to the Jewish people, Everything, including the Golan Heights, Judea, Samaria, and all of that. It's ours.
On this beautiful summer-like day, a great number of students came out. Not only students from New York, but youth groups from Miami and Toronto came out to lend support for the settlements and the freedom of Jonathan Pollard. Reporting live on 5th Avenue and 54th Street, Caroline Greenberg for the JNN World News.
And we'll be right back in a moment with a special look at VE Day. Please stay with us.
It began in 1925 with Ze'ev Jabotinsky, a movement led by giants like former Prime Ministers Menachem Begin and Yitzhak Shamir. And it's moving forward today with Benjamin Netanyahu. It's the future of Zionism. It's the Likud. Be a member, not a spectator. Join today, Likud USA.
In early May, world leaders gathered to commemorate the 50th anniversary of VE, Victory in Europe Day. It was that first week in May of 1945 that Nazism and Germany were crushed by the Allies. President Clinton, British Prime Minister John Major, and other world leaders were in Moscow for a Veterans Victory Parade in Red Square. The Russians put on a large display of military might to remember a war that cost them 20 million lives. Lost in the flames of World War II were 6 million Jews, exterminated by the trainload in camps such as Auschwitz, Dachau, and Bergen-Belsen. VE Day has special resonance for the Jews. The agreement between Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat has sent alarm bells ringing for many of those who survived the Nazis. Joining us today are 4 survivors of the Holocaust, all of whom are currently board members of the Likud USA, including George Meissner, the board chairman. In addition to Mr. Meissner are Chaim Stern, Alex Friedman, and Rabbi Dr. Chaim Rozwaski. Gentlemen, how did each of you come to Nazism and how did you survive it?
I came to Nazism the easy way. I was born in Berlin, Germany, and I was lucky to have parents who realized very early that Hitler meant exactly what he was saying, that he meant to exterminate the Jews. And on Kristallnacht, the afternoon of Kristallnacht, my father took us out of Germany, through Poland, and ultimately to the United States.
I didn't come to Nazism. Nazism came to me. After the war between Germany and Russia broke out, our town in White Russia, today known as Belarus, was occupied by the Germans. And shortly thereafter, the Jewish community was moved into a ghetto. Half of the ghetto population was virtually exterminated a little bit later. And half a year after the first extermination, the entire ghetto was destroyed. All the Jews were killed. And some of us managed, however, to escape and survive in the forests with the partisans. And finally, we were liberated in 1944 as the war was marching on and the Russian armies were pushing the German armies backwards from Russia back toward the Belarus into Warsaw, toward Warsaw, and finally the conclusion of the war.
I came from a town in Czechoslovakia, which is called Košice, and I was 14 and a half years old. And the Germans came into our town approximately March 1944, and previously we had tremendous amount of problems, and we knew that catastrophes that are existing already in part of Poland because our cities were close. But the Germans succeeded very much in a week or 10 days almost to dehumanize us. And of course, some of them, they succeeded to a certain extent that we could not imagine the catastrophe that awaits us. Of course, it was very difficult times, and you had to be a very strong person to survive. You had to have faith, and you had to have special abilities not to lose yourself. But none of us were not touched by it. And some of us who succeeded, who came back, is very hard to explain how did we came out of it.
I was born in Hust. At the time it was Czechoslovakia. In 1939, the Hungarians occupied us. In early 1944, the Germans occupied us, made ghettos, and in early May, we were deported to Auschwitz. From Auschwitz, they sent us to Warsaw, to the ghetto. We cleaned up the ghetto, took apart the Jewish ghetto, Then the Polish partisans surrounded us. The Germans broke through the lines and they took us by foot to Germany. And from there they took us to Dachau. And from Dachau they sent us to Mildorf. I was liberated in April 30, 1945.
Tell me, gentlemen, are there parallels between the Rabin-Arafat deal and the Hitler-Chamberlain-Munich Pact?
It's more than a parallel, it's a replication. The purpose of the Munich agreement between Chamberlain and Arafat was based on a false promise or a hope that there is going to be some kind of peace in Europe. The basis of this agreement in Oslo is also based on an assumption that there's going to be peace and the willingness on the part of the Arabs to cooperate with the Israelis. Events have shown that both of them are illusions. There's no substance in the promises which the Arabs have made, and besides it's even worse than the agreement between Chamberlain and Hitler, because Chamberlain did not give up anything of England to Germany, whereas Israel is ceding much of its own territory and its very essence to the Arabs, to Arafat, and that's the worst part of it all.
As a matter of fact, the rabbi is absolutely correct. It is very, very similar, because if you recall back in 1938, the whole world knew or should have known that Hitler had an appetite which would never be satisfied. And he marched into Austria, wanted peace of Czechoslovakia, and made it clear that ultimately Poland would also be part of his appetite. Yet, Chamberlain decided, give, and give, knowing full well that you could never satisfy Hitler. Unfortunately, I think that the example is very clear to us today.
Okay. Why are you and other survivors so concerned for Israel today?
We're concerned. You take the Second World War. The Allies had all the power to stop the Germans from deporting Jews to Auschwitz. You visit today Auschwitz and Birkenau. Birkenau were the inmates, where the gas chambers were, where the extermination happened. In Auschwitz, they had thousands of SS. In all the buildings today, I visit Auschwitz maybe twice a year. Not a single bullet hole is in any one of them. The only place where the Germans were really safe in the Second War, and the rails leading to Auschwitz, and the Germans to do the job there to exterminate our people. That's America, Russia, England, and France. All the Allies were against us. And today you have to watch that Israel shouldn't be weak. Israel has got to be able to defend herself, and not only defend herself, to defend the Jew in need, if needed, any place in the world, it shouldn't be exterminated like we were exterminated.
In line with what Chaim said, the only thing really that kept me alive, and I had my brother who lived it till about 2 weeks before the end of the war, so did my father. And most of us, after we kept our faith and we wanted to live, and what was our biggest strength, we felt that there are Jews living somewhere else and we wanted to survive. And can you imagine if there would have been a state of Israel in the war years, how many more Jews could have been saved? And there is no question in my mind that never anything like this could happen. And our duty is today, more than ever before, to see a strong Israel, to keep the land as it is. And there's no question about it that there's major problems that are existing. But the right of ours to be there is as strong as ever. And what kept us alive is the faith that there are Jews living somewhere else and we want to survive. And this is the strength that kept us going.
So 50 years after the end of World War II, what lesson should the Jewish people have learned? And what message would you impart to the younger generation and to Israel?
I think the lessons which we learn has to be given in a series of points. One, the Jewish people have to become self-reliant. It's very important for the Jewish people to be united and support each other and rely upon themselves. The same thing is also important for the state of Israel. Israel must always position itself in such a way that politically, militarily, and economically it becomes a self-reliant country. And as long as it builds and works toward that direction, I think its future is secure And I think all the Jewish people throughout the world will be happier to see a country which gives them this sense of feeling of security.
Sure. My way of thinking, I think one of the most important things is to transplant in our younger generation, our children, speak about the Shoah, speak about the Holocaust, and to encourage young people to get involved in Israel, to get involved in Jewish affairs, to get involved in proper things. And there is nothing as important as to remember the past, because to remember the past is to strengthen the future. And our duty is to encourage young people to involve. And of course, by this, I cannot believe that we will fail. We will succeed by transplanting the best that we have seen into the younger generation.
We must learn from history. If we don't learn from history, history is going to repeat itself. And we should have learned the lesson the hard way from our past experiences. We must be strong, and we must stand up for what we believe in. And more important than anything else, our teacher, Zev Jabotinsky, taught us that we must face reality. And we must let the enemy know what reality is, because if the enemy does not realize that you are willing to fight for your rights and there's a limit to what you're going to do, they're forever going to have that gleam of hope which will always prevent peace.
That's all for our program today. If you'd like a copy of this show or more information of any of the issues shown here, our address and phone number will follow shortly. On behalf of everyone at JNN, I'm Shelley Kaminer. Good night.